In the 1980s, a generation of actresses became familiar fixtures of American pop culture. They appeared constantly in movie theaters, on cable television, and on the shelves of video stores, recognized by millions. But familiarity did not always lead to lasting careers. Over time, some momentum faded, and others disappeared almost entirely. Elisabeth Shue did not. She didn't vanish from view. She was everywhere. For an entire generation, she became a natural part of the cinematic landscape. This video focuses on several key films from her career, explores the source of her enduring appeal, and examines the industry shift that quietly brought her back into focus later on. Elisabeth Shue grew up in a stable, middle-class family in New Jersey. She wasn't connected to the entertainment world, and she didn't arrive in Hollywood with any sense that success was guaranteed. Elisabeth Shue began her career at a young age, appearing in television commercials as a teenager before moving into small film roles. From the start, what set her apart wasn't flash or reinvention, but presence. She came across as natural and approachable, someone audiences could believe in immediately, and that quality quickly became her defining image. Unlike many of her contemporaries, she was rarely transformed or dramatically restyled from one film to the next. There were no shocking makeovers or sudden reinventions. Instead, she was consistently presented as the familiar girl next door. That consistency was reassuring to casting directors, studios, and audiences alike, making her a reliable and highly marketable choice. But it also meant she was seldom pushed into unfamiliar territory or given the chance to surprise people. While that stability worked extremely well in the 1980s, it quietly placed limits on how she was perceived within the industry. Her first major breakthrough came in 1984 with The Karate Kid, where she played Ally, Daniel's love interest. The role itself was modest, but the film was massive. Audiences remembered her because she felt real in a way many teen characters did not. Then, in 1987, Adventures in Babysitting moved her fully into the spotlight, placing her front and center for the first time as the film's lead. Elisabeth Shue's appeal was rooted in warmth and relatability. She was effortlessly funny, never forcing it, and audiences responded to that ease. The film itself was hardly a critical favorite, but it resonated with viewers and found a long second life on television and VHS. By the late 1980s, Elisabeth Shue seemed to be everywhere, on movie screens, on cable reruns, and lining the shelves of video stores. She wasn't alone in this kind of visibility. Many actresses of the decade followed similar trajectories, though their outcomes varied dramatically. While some actresses successfully moved into more complex, prestige-driven roles and sustained that momentum, Elisabeth Shue landed somewhere in between. She never stopped working, but the role she was offered rarely moved her career forward in a meaningful way. The late 1980s and early 1990s were a profitable period for many actors. The VHS rental boom was enormous, and films that might have faded after their theatrical runs continued to circulate for years in living rooms across America. Shue appeared in many of them. Cocktail in 1988, Back to the Future Part 2 and Part 3, Soap Dish in 1991, these were not small projects. She shared the screen with Tom Cruise, Michael J. Fox, Sally Field. Yet the parts themselves remained narrow: the girlfriend, the love interest, the supporting presence. Looking back, it becomes clear that many actors we associate with the 1980s were working within similarly tight boundaries. Not because they lacked talent, but because the roles available to them often circled the same familiar themes. The generation before, performers like Meryl Streep, Jessica Lange, and Diane Wiest were taken seriously much earlier, largely because they were offered more adult, layered material. By contrast, the 1980s marked a tonal shift. Films became lighter, more accessible, and increasingly shaped to appeal to the widest possible audience. Actors who emerged during that era weren't necessarily at a disadvantage, but they were entering a different version of the industry, one that offered fewer chances to truly stretch themselves artistically. By the early 1990s, Elisabeth Shue began to shift course. She started choosing smaller, rougher projects, films that didn't depend on her being instantly likable or safely familiar. In 1994, she appeared in Radio Inside, a low-profile independent drama that struggled to find wide distribution. A year later, she collaborated with Steven Soderbergh on The Underneath, a moody, noir-inspired crime film where she played a morally uncertain character. The movie wasn't a commercial success, but it marked a clear departure from expectations. Shue was deliberately seeking material that pushed her into unfamiliar territory, and those choices quietly set the stage for what followed. So when Leaving Las Vegas was released in 1995, hearing that Elisabeth Shue was part of the cast came as a genuine surprise, not because her talent was in doubt, but because the role felt worlds away from anything audiences had seen her do before. Leaving Las Vegas is a film that refuses to soften its edges. It confronts addiction, self-destruction, and a fragile relationship that exists somewhere in between. Elisabeth Shue plays Sarah, a sex worker who forms a bond with Nicolas Cage's character, a man methodically drinking himself toward the end. What stands out most isn't that Shue is good in the role, but how carefully she holds herself back. This is unmistakably Cage's film, placed front and center, yet it simply wouldn't function without her. She never competes for attention, never tries to elevate her presence. Instead, she anchors herself within a story that offers no safety net to anyone involved. Nothing feels forced or heightened. The performances unfold with an uneasy naturalism that blurs the line between acting and lived experience. And while Sarah appears hardened on the surface, there are moments where genuine vulnerability slips through. The result is a deeply grounded performance, one that quietly reshapes how you understand Elisabeth Shue as an actor. The Oscar nomination that followed didn't reveal something new. It merely illuminated what had been there all along, inevitably prompting the question of how different her career might have looked if roles like this hadn't been the rare exception. That kind of role was something she had rarely been offered before, and, in many ways, rarely would be again. An Oscar nomination doesn't always reroute a career. Elisabeth Shue received the recognition, but the wave of transformative offers never quite arrived. She continued working, though with a more deliberate sense of choice, gradually balancing her professional life with her personal one. She married, had children, and some interpreted that as stepping away. It wasn't. It was a decision about longevity. She no longer needed to chase constant visibility. Films like Palmetto and Hollow Man came and went. They didn't redefine her career, but they didn't diminish it either. She remained present without burning out. For a long time, television had been seen as a fallback, where actors went when film opportunities dried up. Yet in the 1980s, it was often the launchpad. Michael J. Fox moved from Family Ties to Back to the Future. Bruce Willis went from moonlighting to Die Hard. Robin Williams leapt from Mork and Mindy to film stardom. Television was the first step. Film was the destination. Over time, that equation reversed. Prestige television became the space where actors could do their most interesting work and sustain long, meaningful careers. Elisabeth Shue reached that industry shift at exactly the right moment. In the mid-2000s, she appeared on CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, followed later by Cobra Kai, where she returned to her Karate Kid roots, and more recently The Boys, taking on a morally complex role in one of streaming's most prominent series. Her move to television wasn't a retreat from film, it was a response to where the most interesting work now lived. There's nothing sensational about Elisabeth Shue's story. No scandal. No sudden disappearance. It's a story shaped by timing, by when an actor enters the industry and what that industry happens to reward in a given era. Some of her contemporaries did break into a different category. Actresses like Michelle Pfeiffer, Susan Sarandon, and Geena Davis were offered roles that rapidly transformed how they were perceived. Shue's path was quieter, steadier, long, consistent, and by any reasonable measure, successful. Leaving Las Vegas offers a glimpse of an alternate direction, not one she needed, but one that naturally invites curiosity. What ultimately sustained her career was consistency. She didn't chase reinvention for its own sake. Her performances remained grounded and recognizable across 4 decades. She maintained strong relationships within the industry, was rarely pushed aside, and preserved the natural, believable presence that first made people notice her. Elisabeth Shue never bent herself to passing trends, never reshaped her face or tried to reinvent who she was in order to stay relevant. What's compelling is where that choice eventually led her, into a form of television that isn't merely respected, but actively embraced. Cobra Kai draws directly on shared nostalgia, reconnecting with an entire generation that grew up alongside her, while The Boys places her in a much darker, sharper world that feels distinctly of the present moment. These roles don't register as a step down. They offer continuity, visibility, and characters that recognize experience rather than push it aside. There's something genuinely satisfying about watching actors we grew up with evolve on screen instead of being quietly phased out. In that sense, we're living in a rare window right now. The balance has shifted. Television has become a place where careers don't simply wind down, but grow deeper. Seen this way, Elisabeth Shue's career doesn't feel unfinished at all. It feels whole, shaped by its time, yet still unfolding in an environment that allows her to thrive. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this kind of storytelling, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, or all three. It truly makes a difference. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next one.